And hello everyone, welcome back to another tutorial. So in this tutorial, we'll be looking at case statements. If you haven't seen my video on if statements yet, that would be the previous video, the one just before this one, then I highly recommend you do, because it's kind of going to build off of that tutorial. So if you haven't seen that one, then I highly recommend you do. Same with the variables tutorial. If you do not know what a variable is, or any type of data type at least, then you do need to go watch those tutorials, because yet again, all of the future tutorials are going to build from those tutorials. Alright, so here we have a little piece of code. Let's make sure it works by saying G++. And here we go, hello world. So in the previous video, we covered if statements. For example, if we had a number, let's say int day of week, for example, and we made this something like 2. Then, if we were to say if day of week is, let's say, equal to 1, then it would give us Monday, for example. Then let's say it says return Monday or something. And then of course, if we then said else if day of week is equal to 2, then it would be the same process, but this time instead of Monday it would be Tuesday. I'm just going to do letters like that, make it simpler. So then it would be Tuesday, and then it goes on and on like that until we, and that should have to be a semicolon before I forget, and that it will just continue like this on and on until we have reached the 7th day. So dot 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 dot, and then we can say else if day of week is equal to 7, then it should return Sunday, like that. And then after that we can do something like else, and it's a return invalid day of week, something like that. So that would be the basics of the if statement version. So what I am going to do is I'm going to create a string here. So I'm going to say std string, I'm going to call this day. So day of week would be the number and day would be the actual day. And I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to assign it to anything just yet. So the idea is that we create this if statement in a way that is either similar or easier to read, faster in terms of performance, and just faster to type. Now, this method I'm going to show you isn't that much faster in performance. Some people will say it's so much faster, but to be honest, most of the time you won't really get that big of a difference with this next method. So it's mostly up to personal preference. It's not just because someone says it's faster does not mean it necessarily is in all scenarios. Anyhow, so it's called a switch statement. It starts with switch, and then in here you specify the variable you want to check. So this variable, we want to check this variable, so that day of week. So I'm going to specify day of week. Now once we have that, we can just do this, and this is the start of the switch statement. Now we're going to say case, and in this case we can specify one case to do. We can check on one case. And take note, I believe in C++ at least, switch statements only support at integers and maybe floats. I'm not really too sure about that. I will test that in a second, but I'm pretty sure it only supports integers. So if you want to work with something else that is not an integer, it's recommended to then just go for an if statement. Anyhow, so let's say 1 for example here. Now this will check for the case of 1. This right here, this part here, is exactly the same as saying this. It's exactly the same. And now here we can say colon. Take note, the syntax here changes to a colon and no longer brackets. So it's colon. And here we can say return, or not return, I'm going to say day will then become Monday. And then we can say break. Now this is also just my personal preference in terms of how I format it. I like to do that because that makes me see that, okay, so this is the end of it, and this should have a semicolon. And this is the end of this case. But some people also like to do this, and others also like to do this. I just personally find it most enjoyable this way. Okay, so this right here is exactly the same as this if statement right here. They're basically the same thing. The difference is here we just set day equal to Monday. So if we were to replace this return here with that, it would be exactly the same thing. Day would become Monday if this was 1. And then of course we can then make this to do something more. So now here we can say, whoops, 2. So now that will be 2, and here we can say 2, and I'm going to go with 3 letters again. Like that. Let's actually do it for the whole week. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here we have a 3, we have a 4, we have a 5, we have a 6, and we have a 7. And now here we can say day is equal to Wednesday, so wed, and here it would be equal to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now this break here, this is there for a reason, because if this case statement, that's also why people are doing this, but if this case statement executes, then we want to break out of this switch. That's why that break exists. If it wasn't here, once it does this case, it will look through all of the other cases as well. But here, once it finds this case, it's going to break out of it. That's why there's a break here. See out. And I'm going to see out the day here. Now if we were to run this, we'll get Tuesday. Because day of week was 2. And we check the day of week against 2. That's what we did. If we were to make this, let's say 6, then now it would be Saturday. But the thing is, what if it's 8? Because there are no 8 days in a week. We'd get nothing. Because here it only covers up until 7. So if none of these actually hits anything, it's just going to skip it. So that's what's happening here. It is not going to do anything. And take that, you can also put more things in here before we continue. For example, you can put another if statement in here, and with some sort of condition, and then you can like see out. It isn't just limited to something like this. You know, you can do more of it than that. Whoops, more of it than just do one thing. So you can do multiple things in here. I'm just doing one thing to keep it simple. It's just like an if statement. You can even have multiple case statements within a case statement, and you can have whatnot. Although it's not very common to see a case statement within another case statement. Kind of weird. Anyhow, now with an if-else statement, we have an else. And that else gets executed if the if statement doesn't execute. For example, if the if, and then we have our else if, and if that doesn't execute, then we have our else. And then the else will execute. So if this executes, these will be skipped. If this executes, these will be skipped. Or that one will be skipped. If neither of these two execute, then this one will be executed. So yeah, that's what we have with an if statement. Well, in case statement, we have the same thing. We have a default. And this is what we'll default to if this is what it will default to if none of these up here, if they execute. So we can just say day is equal to invalid day entered. Now if we were to run this, and of course if we were to have a semicolon there, if we were to run this, then we'd get invalid day entered. And here with the default, the break is also optional. You don't necessarily need to add the break because this is what it will default to. And since at the bottom, it's not going to necessarily need to do anything else. So that break doesn't need to be there since it will automatically break out since it's at the end of this right here. And it's because it's the default value. It's what will execute if none of these above executes. So yeah, that break is optional. So that's the case statement. It's as simple as that. It's basically an if statement, but it's a little bit different in terms of how it functions. You know, instead of having to say if day of week is equal to 1, then do something. Then else if day of week and is equal to 2. Else if day of week is equal to 3. Instead of having to do that constantly over and over and over again, we just have day of week. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? And that's why I also love this, because it just decreases the amount of typing you have to do. Because you don't have to say day of week constantly over and over. You just say what you want to change and you say break. And that's it. After that, you don't really have to worry. Now let's check it, because I'm pretty sure it only works with integers and maybe floats, but I'm pretty sure just integers. So here I'm going to make that equal to nothing, and here I'm going to make this equal to Monday. And here we can see if it works. Because I myself, I'm not sure. So I'm going to switch this to day, because we want to check day. Let's see here. Yeah, this constant expression has type int instead of, okay, never mind. And in here we can of course say Monday. And does this go away? This constant expression has type char pointer instead of required std string. Okay, that means we can just say std string. But we could have said char pointer as well. We haven't really covered it, but doesn't really matter too much. And now here we have expression must have a constant value. Whoa, okay. Let's say const. Wonder if that will work. Nope. Okay. So I'm not quite sure if a string can be used, but I'm pretty sure a const char pointer should. So let's say a const char pointer. And I know we haven't covered this, but just bear with me for a second here. And let's see. And it works. So it does work. And then here we can of course make this day of week. Control C and then Control, and we can just change all of these to day of week. And yeah, good. Boom, day of week. And then here we can just take all of these and we can just replace them. And here, if it's by default, it's just going to be 0, then we're not going to care about it. So if it returns 0, it means there wasn't a valid week. And in here, of course, we can then say something like a day of week instead of day. Whoops, DC, and then we just paste it there. Okay. And here it switches day. And yes, here we go. Expression must have an integral or enum type, so it has to be a number. So with all of this effort, we still came out on the end of the day where we are not allowed to use chars or strings. Now, before I continue, I just want to explain this. Basically, it's a string. That's what it is. It's basically a string. It's just a constant, so it cannot be changed. That's what const means. It means once it has been declared, you cannot change it. Yeah, so that's the basics of a switch or case statement. And that's also a little bit of the basics of this. You can just think of it as a normal string. You know, it's like you have a bunch of characters mashed together, just like with a normal string. Just this time you call it a char pointer or a const char pointer instead of, and that's a pointer. We'll be getting to pointers far later in the tutorial, but right now it's not important. But yeah, it's a string. So yeah, this is a basic if statement, but it only works with enums, which we'll be getting into in the future videos, and integers. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all again in the next C++ tutorial.